Hello everyone, this is our screencast on the lesson plan, and I'm going to give you an overview of what to expect in when doing a lesson plan. So we are, as you know, at the point where we have reviewed learning theory and motivation theory, and now we can actually focus on how we can use those ideas to plan our lessons, or at least get a basic understanding of how to plan our lessons. To begin our discussion, I thought we should examine why we should plan our lessons. After all, this is educational psychology, and so a lot of the things that we do is try to explain why we do the things that we do in the classroom. And likewise, we need to understand why we plan our lessons. There are a number of reasons to plan. Some of these are very legitimate reasons. Throughout your teaching career, you may need to build lessons for any number of these reasons: to please professors, to please school administrators, to remember what the teacher should do, or to remember what students should do. But let's assume that these reasons didn't exist. Is there a benefit to lesson planning? And if there is, what is it? You probably have observed a number of teachers in the classroom, and you may have seen veteran teachers, and it may appear to you that these veteran teachers seldom plan. Or if they do plan, their lesson plans look like little notes on post-it notes or something like that. So as a new teacher, when you're asked to write lesson plans, and our lesson plans are not little notes on post-it notes, but pages long, you're thinking, well, why do we have to do all of this? What gives? Well, there is lesson planning versus writing a lesson plan. A lesson plan can be just completing out a form, but there is also planning a lesson. It is this that all effective teachers do. They plan for a lesson. They may not write a lesson plan, but make no mistake, effective teachers plan for their lessons. So if they do plan, how do they plan? What are their thought processes? How can we plan, and then how do we use those plans to facilitate students' learning? Here's a quote by President Dwight D. Eisenhower. He says, "In planning for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." So I have a picture of a San Diego State football player. And as you know, football players plan for their games. There's practice, and they practice, and they practice, and they practice, so that when they get to the game, they can hopefully implement those plans no matter what happens. They need to be flexible, but they can't just follow they can't do what they do in the rehearsal or in the practice. They have to be able to adapt to meet the needs of their opponent. I think there's something to it. But let's look at some research. There's a study by Saharic, and it is called The Effective Planning on Teaching. Back in the middle of the 20th century, many psychologists set out to understand the impact of lesson planning on students' learning. Saharic was one of them. He conducted an experimental study meaning he conducted a study where that was set in a very controlled environment. He had some teachers were given a lesson plan that he had created, and he gave them 2 hours to read over the lesson plan, make notes on the lesson plan, and prepare to teach this lesson plan. He also had a number of other teachers who were given a lesson plan. Only this group only had 2 minutes to prepare for the lesson. They were told that they needed that the study was behind schedule, and that they needed to get to teaching right away. These teachers looked over the lesson and then taught it. So Hark then looked at the difference between the two groups of teachers who had to prepare for the lesson. He compared those that had little time with those who had 2 hours or a lot of time to prepare. And what did he find? Essentially, both groups asked a lot of questions. It seems that teachers believe that if you need to teach, you need to ask a lot of questions. But that's where the similarities ended. Then there were a bunch of differences. And what he found was that the teachers who didn't plan asked students to share their thoughts more. So they were interested in what the students had to say about the topic. And they used more authentic means to engage students. So based on what the students said, the teacher crafted activities that tended to respond to students' learning needs. So essentially, teachers were showing that they were more sensitive to what students were thinking about and what they needed. The teachers who had 2 hours to prepare, they seemed to be focused more on getting through the activities, and they stayed very close to the actual activities at hand. Now, this is the Hark study. This has been replicated by other researchers who find that teachers tend, when they plan, they tend to stay focused on the instructional activities and not so much focused on students' thinking. Why? Well, it seems like when we're teaching, it may be that we feel that instructional activities, this seems to be the most important part. We create our activities, and we want to make sure that we implement it. Whereas thinking about students' thinking is, not so much a priority. But what I want you all to have is this belief that both are, at the very least, equally important, because both should have an impact on each other. That is, that you want to design instructional activities that are going to facilitate certain students' thinking. Or you may want students to think a certain way, so you're going to create instructional activities that are going to cause that to happen. So you want to think about these things equally, and you want to see it as a cause and effect. Your activities cause certain kinds of student thinking or meeting certain student learning needs. And likewise, you want certain students' learning needs to be created or generated based on the instructional activities. So, for example, we've been learning about different ways to get students to be engaged, and we know that if we want students to be able to explain their own thinking, then maybe we can have an activity where students engage in partner talk. Or we may want students to be able to use academic language, so we may come up with an activity where they have to engage in a quick write. This is what we want to be thinking about when we plan. What is it that we want students to be thinking about? Like the teacher who really hardly had any time to plan, but using that knowledge to generate activities that's going to cause these kinds of thinking. and students. So in this class, we are going to construct a lesson plan format that allows us to make strong connections between our instructional activities and the thinking we want our students to do. That's what we want to try to do. So when we reflect back on President Eisenhower's quote, we're thinking that we want to be planning for a class in a way that we over-prepare so that when we get into the classroom, it becomes useless, but the planning has been indispensable. So that's what we want to do. So in class, actually, I'm going to have you look at elements of a lesson plan and sort of look at that in a way to see how you can build a lesson that facilitates students' thinking. So that's what we're going to do in class on Wednesday. If it's not clear what we're going to do, don't worry, I'll explain it in class on Wednesday. And of course, we're going to finish our screencast that we started last week. Thank you for listening. This is it. We're done. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.